Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the Meher Baba program. I'm Fred Stankus from the Avatar Meher Baba Center in Southern California. Today's program is Dr. Ginde and Son. It's about the life of Dr. Ram Ginde, a noted surgeon from India, and his son. And his son happens to be here with us, Suhas Ram Ginde. Welcome to the Meher Baba program.
Thank you, Fred. Jai Baba to you.
Jai Baba. Suhas will share his experiences that he had with Meher Baba, and also tell about his life with his father, and also his father's life with Meher Baba. Before we begin, let's tell you who Meher Baba is. So we will show a footage of Meher Baba now and discuss who Meher Baba is.
Avatar Meher Baba. Meherwan Shahryar Irani, known as Meher Baba, was born in Pune, India on February 25, 1894, of Persian parents. His father, Shahryar Irani, was of Zoroastrian faith and a true seeker of God. Meherwan went to a Christian high school in Pune and later attended Deccan College. In 1913, while still in college, a momentous event occurred in his life. The meeting with Hazrat Babajan, an ancient Mohammedan woman, one of the 5 perfect masters of the age. Babajan gave him God realization and made him aware of his high spiritual destiny. Eventually, he was drawn to seek out another perfect master, Upasni Maharaj, a Hindu who lived in Sakori. During the next 7 years, Maharaj gave Meherwan gnosis, or divine knowledge. Thus, Meherwan attained spiritual perfection. His spiritual mission began in 1921 when he drew together his first close disciples. It was these early disciples who gave him the name Meher Baba, which means compassionate father. After years of intensive training of his disciples, Meher Baba established a colony near Ahmednagar that is called Meherabad. Here, the master's work embraced a free school where spiritual training was stressed, a free hospital and dispensary, and shelter for the poor. No distinction was made between the high castes and the untouchables. All mingled in common fellowship through the inspiration of the master. To his disciples at Meherabad, who were of different castes and creeds, he gave a training of moral discipline, love for God, spiritual understanding, and selfless service. Meher Baba told his disciples that from July 10, 1925, he would observe silence. Since that day, he has maintained this silence throughout the years. His many spiritual discourses and messages have been dictated by means of an alphabet board. Much later, the master discontinued the use of the board and reduced all communication to hand gestures unique in expressiveness and understandable to many. Meher Baba has traveled to the Western world 6 times, first in 1931 when he contacted his early Western disciples. His last visit to America was in 1958 when he and his disciples stayed at the center established for his work at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. In India, as many as 100,000 people have come in one day to seek his darshan or blessing. From all over the world, there are those who have journeyed to spend a few days, even a single day, in his presence. An important part of Meher Baba's work through the years has been to personally contact and to serve hundreds of those known in India as musts. These are advanced pilgrims on the spiritual path who have become spiritually intoxicated from direct awareness of God. For this work, he has traveled many thousands of miles to remote places throughout India and Ceylon, Sri Lanka now. Other vital work has been the washing of the lepers, the washing of the feet of thousands of poor, and the distribution of grain and cloth to the destitute. Meher Baba asserts that he is the same ancient one come again to redeem man from his bondage of ignorance and to guide him to realize his true self, which is God. Meher Baba is acknowledged by his many followers all over the world as the avatar of the age. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Thank you, Suhas.
You're welcome, Fred.
Now let's get to the story of how your father was with Meher Baba on January 31st, 1969. Or I should say he was trying to reach Meher Baba on that fateful day when Meher Baba dropped his physical body. Can you fill us in to bring up that particular incident?
Well, from what I remember, I was here in America, but this is from something that I've read from books about Baba's life. Baba was in the process of dropping his body, so to speak, and he was in extreme pain, and he was surrounded by his mandali, or his disciples. And he had specifically called for my dad to be there by his side. And my dad had been contacted by Adi Irani, Baba's secretary, to be ready and to come to Baba's side whenever he called for him. So my dad had made everything ready in case the call came in. The call came in. He came out. He was on his way to Ahmednagar and Meherazad, where Baba was in his house. And apparently he had a special driver. The arrangements were made for that. And on his way to Pune, apparently, between Pune and Ahmednagar, the driver suddenly wanted to go into the fields to ease himself. And this delayed my dad getting to Baba on time just before Baba dropped his body. The driver seemed to be totally unconcerned about the rushing to get there. My dad had been told by Baba in the past not to pressure the driver to go fast. So he had to listen to his master, Baba, and obey him by not pressuring the driver. So this is when he arrived at Ahmednagar. Baba had just dropped his body. He was 15 minutes late. And it was a big shock to my dad. He had a heart attack when he heard about it at Adi Irani's office at Kushru Quarters in Ahmednagar. And then he took charge of the situation, remembered that Baba had asked the song Begin the Begin to be played, and also that his body should be brought to the crypt where he was later interred. And then after making the arrangements with the Mandali, he came back to Bombay. He was not there at the time of the interment, but it took 7 days, and he made arrangements for the body to be surrounded by ice so it would not decompose.
I see. So let's go back now to your grandfather, who was of course, your father's father.
Okay.
And your grandfather apparently, first of all, your father was one of the most renowned surgeons in India, and your grandfather also. And your grandfather was a very devout, spiritual man. Can you describe a little bit of him?
I do not remember my grandfather so much because he had passed away when I was very young, but he was a very religious man. I wouldn't say so much spiritual, but he would read the Bhagavad Gita when he got up in the morning before he even started his breakfast or got about with his day. And my dad listened to all these shlokas, as they say, or he listened to these hymns to God in the Hindu faith while he was growing up, not only from his father but also from his grandmother when he was a babe on her lap. And so he was brought up into this atmosphere, so to speak, of religious beliefs. And this was something that he probably carried on throughout his life. And I've also had that kind of appeal in my own life towards the religious.
So he would like get up in the morning early and
Yes.
do the puja and also singing. And he would always make sure that this would be done before he even take food.
Yes.
That was, and your father did that every day of his life.
We try to give the first importance to devotion to God before we begin the day, because this way we have Him with us throughout the day. We carry the Lord with us. So you first, when you wake up, you think about Him, and before you go to sleep at night, you also think about the Lord. So you're always with Him, and you carry that feeling with you throughout the day.
And your grandfather, I guess, handed down to your father the importance of becoming maybe a doctor, because he also became, your
Yes.
father became one of the foremost, neurosurgeons in India.
In the country.
In the
yes.
country.
Possibly in Asia.
Possibly in all of Asia. And so...
Maybe in the world.
And so, can you tell us a little bit about your father's early years? Do you remember when he was studying or becoming a surgeon?
I do remember that he became a doctor. He had gone to Deccan College as an undergraduate, and that's the same college that Baba had attended for 1 year before he got the realization. And in the beginning, my dad studied to be a general doctor. He studied in Bombay at the medical college there, Grant Medical College, and got his MBBS, or they say the first medical degree that you get, which is like 5 years after you finish your regular college. And then he specialized in a specific, in the beginning he was just a general practitioner, GP as you call it here. And then he decided to specialize in neurosurgery. He had heard about Dr. Wilder Penfield, who was his so-called medical guru. He was a founder of modern brain surgery, Dr. Penfield, in Montreal, Canada. And so he went there to study brain surgery as it's known now. Before that it was called lobotomy. So Dr. Penfield taught him the mainstay of his profession. He learned under his master, Dr. Penfield. And then that was in McGill University in Canada and Montreal. And then he came back to Bombay, and then we were just about I was about 3 or 4 years old. Me and I had 2 other brothers, one older and one younger.
I see. And so when is the momentous occasion when your father was called by Meher Baba? When did that occur? I mean, why did it occur? I mean, did he know of Meher Baba beforehand?
My father heard about Baba sometime around 58 or 60. Baba had write-ups in the newspapers and things like that, but he had not come in contact with Baba in person. It seemed that Baba was not eating, then the disciples as Mandali were very concerned. And it came about that Baba had a nerve condition which was very painful. He was in a lot of pain, was not eating, had not eaten for 3 weeks. Now I know that Baba used to do a lot of fasting and stay in seclusion, but this was the first time that he had not eaten in 3 weeks, not even a drop of water. And the Mandali were concerned, so they decided to call upon my father, who was at that time practicing in Bombay. And there was a gentleman named Nariman Dada Chandji who lived close by to the hospital where my dad practiced, and he found him making his rounds and trying to get his attention so he could ask him to come and help Baba. And this probably is the first time my father heard about Baba.
And so while he was making the rounds, Nariman is rushing after him, trying to talk to him. And your father...
to get an audience.
Probably was quite annoyed in a way.
My father was a little annoyed because he was very pressed for time, and he had to deal with a lot of his schedule with his patients that he already had to deal with. So,
well, dealing with that, your father sounds like he was so dedicated to his profession.
Yes, he was.
Meaning that In other words, he must have worked over 12 hours a day.
Probably 14. He would visit about 2 or 3 hospitals in one day, making the rounds. He was a wonderful man. Besides working with the patients, he also made sure that during the healing process, that he would make sure that they were comfortable, and he would spend time in the post-operative.
How do these people pay for their services in India?
It's very
one of the
difficult.
poorest countries in the world.
Well, Fred, it's very difficult because, as you know, most of the hospitals in India are run by the government, so they usually get free treatment there.
So most of his services were
I would say about
free.
90 to 95% of his patients did not have the money to pay him. He had a private practice of maybe about 5%. That would be probably the upper elite in the country that would seek his services. And they could afford to pay him, and he probably lived on what he made on that.
But other than that, it was just...
he did get a salary from the hospitals, but it was a flat sum of money and not per patient, so to speak.
Right, but anyway, going back now, Nariman is convincing your father to come see Baba.
Well, finally, he got the audience with Nariman, and he decided then to make the trip to Ahmednagar. And so a car was arranged for and a driver was arranged for him to take him there, because initially my dad wanted Baba to come to the hospital in Bombay or even in Pune, because the situation, he had read some reports on Baba's condition, medical report that was written by Dr. Donkin, and he felt that Baba should be taken to a hospital either in a city like Pune or Bombay. Pune is about 120 miles southeast of Bombay. But Nariman said the patient cannot be removed. He would prefer my dad went to him, to Baba. So they made arrangements to go by a car with a driver, and in the beginning, my dad thought that it would be like maybe a couple of hours drive, but they kept on going into the night past Pune, and he finally wound up at Ahmednagar, and that's where he first came across Baba. And
then what happened?
Okay, well, that's the story now. He found that Baba was in a lot of pain, and that he was told he hadn't eaten in about 3 weeks, and found that Baba had a lot of sores and things around his ears and his mouth. It was sort of like some kind of a herpes condition. And he said that he diagnosed the problem as something called Ramsay-Hunt's neuralgia. It's a nerve condition where a couple of nerves are left jangling or dangling in the head. I'm not a doctor, so I cannot really go into the details of that, but to alleviate that pain, he said the only way he could do was prescribe some kind of medication that would take the pain away, like a stronger aspirin or something like that, ibuprofen. But he did not want the alternative, which was that you had to inject the person in the head and stop the nerve by putting a little bit of alcohol to deaden it.
Wow.
But if the operation didn't go well, then it's possible that the patient could have numbness on one side of his face. So he was very apprehensive about doing that, but he did say that...
How long was this needle? It must have been a monstrous size.
Well, actually, it was a large needle, and inside that needle was a smaller needle that had the drop of absolute alcohol that he could put on it, on the nerve, that is.
Right.
So Baba says, immediately when he heard about this, Baba says, he got very interested in the treatment. He said, I'm interested in having this done to me. So my dad said, we have to prepare the room, get it clean and without germs, anesthetized. Yeah. So Dr. Gohar, who was with Baba for a long time as one of his Mandali members, made preparations for that when my dad went to have a little breakfast, and come and read some of the articles on Baba's condition that were written by the other doctors that were treating him at that time, local doctors. And after he came out, the room was made without germs, as they say, and he prepared to give Baba a shot. So he had this long needle that looked almost like a nail, and inside that was a smaller needle, as I mentioned before, and he gave Baba a shot right in the temple.
Well, you have to say one thing. I read some of the preview on this.
Yeah.
That a normal situation with this
Yes.
would sometimes take probing for an hour to 2.5
Yes.
hours, and which is very excruciating
Yes.
to the patient.
Yes.
Because to find that exact spot is almost
Well, and to do it outside of a hospital, that's even more difficult.
Exactly. So
because
he now is injecting.
he is in a
faith
house.
alone.
Exactly. He's in a house. There are no instruments other than what my father had in his bag. He first measured Baba's head as to where exactly he would have to insert the needle, and I don't know how he did it. He said he just forgot everything, my father says in a tape that I listened to. He just became like an instrument in Baba's hands. And I don't know how he did it. The needle went into Baba's forehead. The people around said you could almost hear the pop as it went through the skull. And then immediately he had to release a drop of alcohol, because also not only did you have to get in the right spot, you also had to get the needle into the right depth to hit the right nerve, because otherwise you might get the person paralyzed for life. And then the alcohol hit, and he had told Baba. Baba said, I will just sit quiet, and my dad told him, once you feel the pain going away, just raise your finger. That way I know that I've hit the right spot. So the needle went in, he gave him the alcohol on the nerve, and Baba raised the hand, and the pain was gone. And my dad had just become an instrument in Baba's hands. And then immediately Baba asked for some food to be brought in. So they brought some dal and rice. And the first morsel, Baba, with his own hand, he put it into my dad's mouth, which is incredible. It's like a prasad, an offering. Exactly. And then Baba ate the rest of the dal and rice, and he asked for some water, and he said, I'm very happy.
So that's when your father sort of came to see Baba more than once after that. He started seeing him for a regular
Well,
period.
in the beginning, my dad just came to do his work as a doctor with a patient. After the operation was over, my dad went to Adi Irani's office and asked him, and they were trying to tell my dad who Baba was. And my dad said, he might be someone, I'm not interested in this at all. Later, and then about 2-3 years went by, and my dad didn't hear any more from Baba, I guess. A couple of years after that, I think this incident happened sometime in 1961 with the injection, 1960-61. I'm not very clear on the exact year, because one never knows how Baba comes into our life. Exactly.
And then there's a photo I think we have here of your family with Baba. Perhaps you could maybe point out in the photo some of the people. There's the photos up on the screen now. Okay. There's your father.
My father is sitting on the left-hand side of Baba.
Right.
And then my mother is sitting next to Baba on his right, on the floor.
You're not in the photo, huh?
No, I'm not. This was taken in Pune at Guru Prasad in 1965.
These are some of your other relatives?
Yes, my father's other youngest brother is the standing second from the left. He was also a very famous classical music singer in India. And then another brother of my father's on the extreme right on the floor, kind of looking up, with the little boy on the very front behind him. On the extreme right on the floor is another brother of my dad. And my dad, as you can see, is sitting on a little pedestal. And Baba's almost like holding on to him.
I think we have another photo here, too, of your father with Baba, and we're winding down to about 2 minutes left, so maybe we could describe this photo. Look at your father, looks so happy with Baba there.
Yes, this is probably a private moment with Baba. This was possibly at Guru Prasad somewhere around 65 through 67. Erach is behind Baba, as you know, his interpreter. And they're making a point. Baba is listening to my dad, and my dad has absolute joy on his face.
Well, Baba probably just loved your father, just an example.
Yes, he did.
He gave to many with his dedication as a doctor. I mean, he epitomizes what I think a doctor should be, and that is a doctor gives of his life to serve others, not just for his own benefit.
Well, Fred, before I even met Baba, my dad was like a god to me because he saved people's lives as a doctor. He was dedicated. He saved a lot of people who could have been, who were dying of brain problems or tumors and stuff like that. I think sometime in 1963, my dad had a heart attack, and this is when a telegram came to my dad from Baba saying, "Don't worry about anything, my nazar or my divine sight is on you." And my dad had it next to his bedstead. And I guess since then, my dad began to feel a little bit more internally towards Baba as just more than another person.
It's wonderful. It looks like our time is about up now. I really thank you, Suhas.
You're welcome.
And we'll be back next week for the program about your relationship with Baba, because you did meet him also.
Yes.
So we thank you very much for tuning in to the Meher Baba program. Until next time, remember, don't worry, be happy. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.